Today we're talking about the different states of matter. Three types of states of matter are gas, liquid, and solid. See, the particles in solid are very close, the particles in gas are very far apart, and the particles in liquid are in the middle. Now here are some examples of the three states of matter. First up, solid. A pillow is solid, a TV remote is solid, any stuffed animal is solid. Some examples of liquids are coconut juice is liquid, water is liquid, and milk is liquid. Now here are some examples of gas. First example of gas is wind. Second example of gas is air. And the last example of gas is water vapor from when you're boiling water. Here, as you can see, are some differences about the particles in solid, liquid, and gas. Now here are some more information about the particles in solid, liquid, and gas. The particles in solids are held firmly in place by forces of attraction. The particles can only vibrate. They cannot move or change places. The particles in liquid are held together by weaker forces of attraction. The particles can move past each other. The particles in gas are not attracted to each other and they can move freely. In order for particles to move or vibrate, they need energy. The more energy they have, the more they can move or vibrate. Now, in the states of matter, some changing processes can happen, such as melting, freezing, boiling, and condensing. Melting is when a solid turns into a liquid. Freezing is when a liquid turns into a solid. Boiling is when a liquid turns into a gas. And condensing is when gas turns into liquid. Now let's talk about diffusion. What exactly is diffusion? An example of diffusion is that if you very carefully put a drop of food dye into a glass of water, you can see the dye very slowly spreading out. Eventually, the dye spreads throughout the water. You can explain this using particle theory. The particles in the food dye and in the water are free to move. The particles of food dye and water move randomly, bumping into each other and changing directions. After some time, these random movements can cause them to become evenly spread. This is called diffusion. Diffusion also happens in gases. Gas particles move more freely than the particles in liquids. Bromine forms a yellow-brown colored gas. Oxygen is a colorless gas. If they are placed together, you can watch as they diffuse into each other. Another example of diffusion is if you put a tea bag in a teapot, or if you spray perfume in a room. They will both eventually spread. Moving on to the pollen grain theory. If you put some pollen grains onto a drop of water on a microscope slide, they float. When you look through the microscope, you will see that the pollen grains are moving about. They jiggle about in random directions. You will see the same effect if you sprinkle some dust on the water. But what makes the pollen grains and dust move? We can explain the random movement of the pollen grains and dust by using the particle theory. The drop of water is made up of millions and millions of tiny water particles. These are much too small to see. The water particles are always moving. When they bump into each other, pollen grains or dust grains, they make them move. Now we will be talking about gas pressure. What happens if you squeeze the gas particles into a smaller space? There are the same numbers of gas particles, but they will now hit the walls of their container more often. This makes the gas pressure greater. The same thing happens when you squeeze more gas particles into a space. This is what happens when you inflate a football. You push more air into the space inside the football. There are more air particles inside the football, so there are more particles and more frequent collisions with the walls of the football. This increases the pressure inside the football. Now here are just some random facts about the three states of matter. So for liquid, as you can see, liquid always takes shape of the container. So we pour water here, it takes shape of the container. And we pour water in the other container, it takes shape of the other container. Now for gas, as you could see, you could not touch gas. For solid, small particles are moving inside it, but you just can't see it. That's all for today. Hope you guys enjoyed and learned something new. Bye! Thank you for watching!